Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are your top stories for the hour. Israeli forces intercepted 13 Gaza-bound aid boats, prompting activist claims of international law violations. US Vice President J.D. Vance blames Democrats for the government shutdown. And European leaders gathered in Copenhagen to discuss Ukraine and a drone wall amid rising airspace threats. The Israeli military has intercepted a flotilla carrying aid to Gaza, saying the boats were nearing an active combat zone. But the activists on board insist they've been detained illegally.
Activists on board at least 2 boats of the global Sumud Flotilla heading for Gaza can be seen raising their hands in the air, with the camera footage saying the boats were surrounded by the Israel Defense Forces. The international flotilla, comprising of around 40 civilian vessels, is on its way to the Strip to deliver medicine and food to Gaza. The Israeli Navy ordered a couple of them to change course. They then detained the people on board.
This is the Israeli Navy. You are approaching a blockaded zone. If you wish to deliver aid to Gaza, you may do so through the established channels.
The activists called the actions of the Israeli military illegal, claiming they were intercepted in international waters.
They're about to arrive at one of the vessels. We will be in contact. Also, this interception is in international waters. This is totally illegal and violates international agreements and law.
The Israeli military says the passengers are safe and healthy, noting in particular Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg. Officials say they've been transferred to an Israeli port, adding that the interception took place because the boats were approaching an active combat zone. Despite the disruption, 30 other boats were continuing with their journey Thursday morning. Organisers say they had hoped to reach the Strip on the 2nd of October had they not been intercepted. The flotilla is the latest seaborne attempt to break Israel's blockade of Gaza, much of which has been devastated by almost 2 years of war.
Political tensions are reaching a boiling point in Washington, United States, with over 750,000 federal workers now caught in the crossfire, working without pay or locked out entirely. As the government shutdown enters its second day, the White House is warning that layoffs may come within days of if no deal is struck.
The US government has officially shut down after Congress and the White House failed to strike a deal on funding. The deadlock, fueled by bitter partisan divisions, is already hitting federal agencies and workers across the country. On the first day of the shutdown, signs went up outside the Capitol and the Library of Congress warning visitors of closures. Around 750,000 federal employees have been told not to work, while troops and Border Patrol agents are ordered to stay on duty without pay. The daily cost to the government is estimated at $400 million. President Donald Trump insists Democrats are to blame, accusing them of shutting it down to protect healthcare subsidies. Democrats, however, say Republicans control both chambers of Congress and the White House and argue the responsibility lies squarely with them. The White House warned that layoffs could start within days if the shutdown continues. At a joint press briefing, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Vice President J.D. Vance blamed Democrats for the impasse.
What they have done instead is to shut down the government because we won't give billions of dollars to healthcare funding for illegal aliens. That is what has actually happened. To the American people who are watching, the reason your government is shut down at this very minute is because, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of congressional Republicans and even a few moderate Democrats supported opening the government, the Chuck Schumer AOC wing of the Democratic Party shut down the government because they said to us, we will open the government, but only if you give billions of dollars of funding for health care for illegal aliens. That's a ridiculous proposition.
Leavitt said agencies are already preparing for cuts, calling them unfortunate but imminent, while Vance added the administration is ready to act swiftly to keep essential government operations running. Democrats reject the threat, with Senate leader Chuck Schumer declaring the shutdown belongs to Trump and his party.
Of Donald Trump's government shutdown.
Analysts say the current standoff is unlikely to drag on, pointing to mounting worker pressure and early signs of compromise in Congress.
I do not think this will last as long as the longest shutdown, which was the 2018 shutdown that lasted 35 days. And that's for sort of a reason unrelated to politics. In that shutdown, by day 32, 33, you started to see sort of wildcat strikes or sickouts among certain workers in the government who were sort of crucial, air traffic controllers, TSA employees, and that quickly sort of put a lot of pressure on both sides to end the shutdown when it started to clog up some major airports in the United States. And I don't think any shutdown will ever go that long again, because I think workers in similar situations will see their power and take actions like that. That said, I don't think the shutdown will go nearly that long to begin with. One is that we already saw last night that the vote on the bill that would have reopened the government failed by 5 votes. And we saw 3 Democrats already voting with the Republicans. And I expect more will peel off in the coming week. And I think there will be sort of a relatively quick deal cut between Senator Schumer and the Republicans. I don't think that will satisfy everybody, but I do think it will reopen the government for a time period, probably 7 weeks in November. We might be right back here.
The standoff is the 15th shutdown since 1981 and one of the most severe in recent memory. With no breakthrough in sight, the battle over government funding is expected to escalate, leaving federal workers and millions of Americans bracing for uncertain weeks ahead.
And now we'll go live to Copenhagen, where leaders are arriving for the European Political Community Summit. And we're joined live by our Andy Miot that has more from the venue. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Dilek. That is exactly right. Hello from Copenhagen and the European Political Community Summit. Everything is set for a day of talks, sessions, roundtables, and bilateral meetings dedicated to Europe's resilience, security, and dependencies. Now, 47 leaders were invited to this summit. Among them is Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev. Aliyev arrived to Denmark yesterday, where he met the Danish royal family and other European leaders for dinner and talks. He also held a bilateral meeting with Moldova's President Maya Sandu. Now, today's gathering is the second major summit, the Danish capital this week. Yesterday, of course, we saw the informal meeting of the EU 27 for talks on Ukraine and collective defense. Now, those proposals that were put on the table by the European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council President Antonio Costa were met with some pushback. There was a proposal to use Russian frozen assets, about 140 billion euros worth, that are deposited in a Belgian bank, to use them as a loan with 0 interest to Ukraine. But Belgium had a problem with it because of the concerns over the legality of such an instrument. The proposal for a drone wall, a multi-layered mechanism that would spot and shoot down enemy drones on the eastern flank of the bloc, met some pushback from major economies, Germany and France, who questioned the feasibility of such an undertaking. There was, of course, the attempt to modify the EU accession process in the bid that the formal talks start only with unanimous support. Costa tried to modify that to a qualified majority to unblock Kiev's path to the European Union. That was met with resistance by Hungary and some others. Now, all these gatherings and summits in the Danish capital are coming at a time of high volatility across Europe. Just over the past few weeks, we saw airspace violations. So, for instance, we've seen drone incursions in Romania and Poland. Estonia reported having 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets in its airspace for 12 minutes. And Denmark, just last week, shut down its airports over the sighting of unidentified drones nearby and over its military installations. In the incident, the country called a hybrid attack. Now, that's a quick, brief overview of yesterday, and we are expecting everything to move along here, and we'll update you as soon as we have more. Studio.
Andy, thank you very much for that roundup. Now, as Andy just rounded up for us, European leaders are in Copenhagen this week for high-level talks ahead of the European Political Community Summit. Yesterday, the 27 leaders held an informal meeting to discuss Ukraine, collective defence and a proposed drone wall to protect Europe's eastern flank.
This week, European leaders have gathered in Copenhagen ahead of the European Political Community, or EPC, summit. On Wednesday, the 27 members of the EU held an informal meeting to discuss Ukraine, collective defence and the so-called drone wall designed to protect Europe's eastern flank. The talks come amid recent airspace violations across Poland, Estonia and Denmark, where airports were temporarily closed after unidentified drones were spotted near military sites. Denmark has banned civil drone flights for the week, while anti-drone teams and a German air defence frigate were deployed to monitor the skies. NATO forces responded to recent incursions with jets, helicopters and Patriot air defence systems. Leaders also explored boosting defence spending and joint European defence projects. Countries including Sweden, Finland, Germany, Denmark and Estonia voiced cautious but broad support for using frozen Russian assets as a €140 billion loan to Ukraine. The Kremlin, however, has condemned the proposal as pure theft. Following the informal talks, European leaders held a press conference to outline progress on key initiatives, including the European drone wall and the Eastern Flank Watch.
This project aims to counter the full spectrum of threats at our eastern borders. A core element of these will be the so-called drone wall. It is basically an anti-drone system that is able to do swift detection, interception, and of course, if necessary, neutralization. Here we draw a lot on Ukraine's expertise, of course, and therefore we must move forward rapidly together with Ukraine and NATO.
The EPC, launched in October 2022 in Prague, aims to strengthen political dialogue, security and cooperation across Europe, connecting EU members and non-members. 6 summits have taken place so far, focusing on peace, security, energy, migration and economic resilience. Future EPC summits are planned for spring 2026 in Armenia and 2028 in Azerbaijan.
Russian airstrikes have knocked out power to the decommissioned Chernobyl nuclear plant, according to Ukraine's energy ministry. The strikes also hit nearby Chernihiv region, cutting electricity to over 300,000 people. The region's governor announced emergency crews are working to restore power and generators have been sent to hospitals and key sites. Officials warned that even though Chernobyl is not active, the power loss could affect systems that still work to contain radiation. Russian troops took control of the plant briefly during the early days of the war with Ukraine. A Russian drone struck again in February, damaging the containment structure's roof. The UK says it's ready to lead a European peacekeeping force in Ukraine, but with troops' numbers falling, critics ask if Britain still has the strength to back up its commitments.
Russia's hybrid war is intensifying. Drones have entered Polish and Romanian airspace. Fighter jets have crossed into Estonia, and suspected sabotage has disrupted airports in Denmark and Norway. At the centre of NATO's response is the United Kingdom. London has proposed leading a 10,000-strong European peacekeeping force for Ukraine, alongside France and other allies. Such a deployment could deter further Russian aggression if front lines freeze, but it would place huge demands on personnel and equipment. The UK's armed forces are already stretched. Army has shrunk from nearly 110,000 soldiers in 2010 to around 73,000 today. Not enough to fill Cardiff's Principality Stadium. Defence chiefs warn the entire army could be expended within a year if it fought a war on the scale of Ukraine's conflict. Even the head of the army admits it won't be ready for a major fight until 2027. Equipment is aging, from Challenger tanks to long-serving submarines running record-length patrols due to maintenance delays. Recruitment struggles, low morale, and past issues with harassment present further challenges. Analysts warn that Britain could run out of ammunition and spares within weeks of a major conflict, with limited air defence systems to protect key bases or cities. As the United States minimises its role in European security and pivots to Asia, the burden falls more heavily on Europe itself. Britain retains nuclear deterrence, advanced technology, and a central NATO role, but sustaining long deployments in Ukraine or elsewhere would test the limits of its armed forces.
Russia's shadow fleet, ships that hide their identities or fly fake flags, has grown fast since 2022. NATO is responding with a new mission, Baltic Sentry, to safeguard undersea cables. And on the front line, Estonia has the green light to act against vessels that pose a danger.
NATO is boosting its defence in the Baltic and North Seas as Russia's shadow fleet grows, raising fears of spying, sabotage and threats to undersea cables. The number of these deceptive ships have surged from 200 in 2022 to nearly 1,000 today. On the front line, Estonia monitors dozens of such vessels daily in the Gulf of Finland, but admits it can do little to stop them. Russia is using grey zone tactics on an unprecedented scale, with around 1/5 of the world's tankers now classed as shadow ships. In response, NATO has launched a Baltic Sentry mission to safeguard undersea cables and pipelines, while the Estonian Navy is geared to confront civilian vessels that threaten its infrastructure. Analysts warn that shadow fleets will remain a global problem well beyond the Ukraine war, pointing to a broader issue of global maritime governance.
The death toll from a magnitude 6.9 earthquake that struck off the central Philippines late on Tuesday has risen to 72. At least 294 people were injured as rescue efforts continue.
The Philippines earthquake that struck on the island of Cebu on Tuesday continues to claim lives. Latest figures show the death toll has risen to 72, with nearly 300 people injured. Rescuers used excavating equipment and sniffer dogs to search for survivors in collapsed houses and rubble from damaged buildings. The 6.9 magnitude quake trapped an unspecified number of residents in the hard-hit city of Bogo. Aftershocks have continued to rattle the area, hampering rescue efforts.
It really collapsed. It was like bam, and then the other side of our building collapsed. It's a good thing that all of the people were all out front.
We were afraid. We thought we would have died by today, but we're thankful that we are all safe. I'm thankful to the Lord.
Many residents have been forced to sleep outdoors in tents or vehicles, gathering in open spaces to collect relief supplies as night fell. In Bogo, hospital staff moved bed-bound patients outside, where they continued treatment with intravenous drips and oxygen in the parking lot. This Cebu quake was the country's deadliest since at least 2013, when a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck the neighboring island of Bohol, killing 222 people. The Philippines experiences more than 800 quakes each year as it sits on what is called the Pacific Ring of Fire.
Elon Musk has become the first person in history to reach a net worth of $500 billion, marking a major milestone in the tech billionaire race on Wednesday. The Tesla and SpaceX CEO Musk hit the historic figure as the value of his shares surged. According to Forbes, Musk owns more than 12% of Tesla, which has surged more than 14% this year. Despite challenges such as sagging car sales, his recent $1 billion share purchase shows confidence in the company's shift toward AI and robotics. Based on Forbes reports, Oracle founder Larry Ellison is the world's second richest person with a fortune of about $350.7 billion.
And other locations.
Turkey is preparing for a major digital leap forward. The government has announced that the nationwide rollout of 5G technology is entering its final phase. Officials say this transition will not only deliver faster internet speeds, but also lay the foundation for a smarter and more reliable digital ecosystem.
Preparations for 5G technology across Turkey are nearly complete. The Transport and Infrastructure Minister Abdülkadir Uraloğlu says the official tender is set to take place on the 16th of October in Ankara. The minister explained that 5G is seen not just as a new generation of mobile connectivity, but as a central pillar of the country's digital transformation. Authorities believe the technology will support smarter cities, Industry 4.0 applications, healthcare innovation and self-driving vehicles, thanks to its high-speed, low-latency and broad connection capacity. Turkey is also looking beyond 5G. The government says it's already secured patents in the field of 6G technology, aiming to position the country as a future leader in next-generation communications. Domestic production is a key part of this plan. Under the end-to-end national 5G project, Turkey will manufacture its own base stations and core network components. New regulations will require up to 60% domestically produced product content and up to 30% of homegrown communications products, with the goal of reducing foreign dependence and strengthening the national economy. Officials highlight that the rollout of 5G will play a vital role in achieving sustainable development goals, while enhancing competitiveness in the global market.
Pakistan is seeing a fast rise in solar-powered farming as growers look for cheaper irrigation options. But experts warn this rapid shift is adding new pressure to already falling groundwater levels.
Farmers in Pakistan are rapidly shifting to solar power to run irrigation pumps. The change is cutting costs but increasing pressure on groundwater in Punjab province. About 400,000 tube wells have moved from grid power to solar. Another 250,000 have been added since 2023. In total, around 650,000 tube wells now run on solar energy. This shift has reduced farm electricity use by 45%. Farmers are irrigating more often and growing more rice. Rice fields increased by 30% between 2023 and 2025. But as a result, the water tables are falling fast. According to the officials, 10 cities face serious water depletion. The government is now launching aquifer recharge projects at more than 40 sites and restoring old irrigation systems.
हमें इस पे स्पेशली जो ध्यान देना है वो वाटर क्वालिटी पे है कि what we are injecting in the aquifer that quality must be equal to the drinking water quality. क्योंकि अगर आपने एक polluted water एक रेन अपना रोड्स से आपने कैच करके उसी को ही इनऑर्गेनिक मैटर्स को और उसमें जिस सारी बायो हैं अपनी इम्प्योरिटीज़ हैं वो सारी की सारी अगर आपने इंजेक्ट कर दी अपने एक्विफर में तो आने वाली नस्लें फिर इसका खमियाजा भुगतेंगी.
Farmers say solar helps them save money and avoid fuel costs.
It keeps my costs low because it runs without diesel and keeps my water supply running smoothly. Over on that side, we would use diesel.
Some say they're making large profits from the switch.
In 4 years, I have made a profit of between $7,000 and $8,000. Even if it is $177 per month, it is around $2,000 per year. It is about $7,000 to $8,000 over 4 years.
Officials warn that without control, solar expansion could worsen Punjab's water crisis.
Turning to regional tensions, Russia is no longer hiding its ambitions in Georgia. A senior Moscow analyst predicts that economic ties and political dialogue between the two neighbours will expand despite their bitter history. The statement comes at a time when Georgia's relations with the European Union are strained to the point of suspension, raising questions about the country's future direction. Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
In 2024, trade between Russia and Georgia reached $2.5 billion, making Moscow one of Tbilisi's largest economic partners. For supporters of closer ties, this is pragmatic policy securing jobs and growth. But for opponents, it looks like dependence on the very power that occupies Georgian territory and undermines its sovereignty. The comments came from Nikolai Silaev of Moscow's prestigious MGIMO University, who argued that there is no reason for Georgian-Russian trade to decline. On the contrary, he predicted new labor migration, stronger markets, and even tentative steps toward restoring diplomatic relations severed after the 2008 war. And all this unfolds against the backdrop of worsening relations with the West. Since last year's parliamentary elections, Brussels has accused the Georgian Drum government of backsliding on democracy. Negotiations with the EU have been put on hold, leaving Tbilisi increasingly isolated from its European partners, but not from Moscow. For contrast, former President Salome Zurabishvili is making a very different case abroad. Speaking at the Warsaw Security Forum, she warned that Russia is waging a hybrid war in Georgia and called for greater Western attention and solidarity. The government, meanwhile, insists that it remains committed to the EU integration path. Officials argue that reforms are ongoing and that criticism from Brussels is politically motivated, emphasizing that Georgia's European course is irreversible. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, reporting for A News.
Now turning to diplomacy in Central Asia, Uzbekistan and the United States have finalised energy agreements worth up to $4 billion. The deals, which include major investments, technology partnerships and long-term projects, were announced following high-level diplomacy at the recent UN General Assembly in New York. Sevil Rajapova is in Tashkent with more.
Uzbekistan has secured major agreements with U.S. partners worth $3 to $4 billion and aimed at transforming the energy sector. The package includes $852 million in U.S. Export-Import Bank loans to modernize compressor stations, alongside investment in advanced gas processing and clean fuel technologies. American firm Air Products will play a leading role, with plans to develop gasification, ammonia, methanol and clean aviation fuel plants. These projects build on earlier deals with Air Products, which include speeding up work on a gas chemical complex in Bukhara, as well as projects in coal gasification and green aviation fuel. These deals were facilitated by the diplomatic momentum of the 80th UN General Assembly, where Uzbekistan's president highlighted openness to investment, sustainable development and cooperation. In side meetings, officials deepened ties with United States companies, with Air Products alone investing more than $1.15 billion in Uzbekistan since 2019, and the new agreements aim to build on that foundation. For reference, during the UN General Assembly, Uzbekistan signed a major deal with Boeing, valued at over $8 billion. And the government highlighted that more than 160 joint programs and projects are already being implemented with the United Nations across various sectors. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Several thrilling encounters unfolded across Europe in the Champions League. Here's a closer look at the results and standout performances from last night's games.
The UEFA Champions League delivered an action-packed night featuring key wins, high-scoring draws and standout performances across Europe. Karabakh extended their perfect start with a 2-0 victory over Copenhagen in Baku, courtesy of goals from Abdallah Zobir and Emmanuel Adai. Paris Saint-Germain edged Barcelona to 2-1, with Gonzalo Ramos scoring a stoppage-time winning goal at the 90th minute. In a thrilling clash, AS Monaco drew 2-2 with Manchester City, as Erling Haaland scored twice, while Jordan Tees and Eric Dyer replied for Monaco. Elsewhere, Arsenal beat Olympiacos 2-0, Newcastle United cruised past Union Saint-Gilloise 4-0, Borussia Dortmund defeated Athletic Club 4-1, Napoli narrowly overcame Sporting CP 2-1, Villarreal and Juventus drew 2-2, and Bayer Leverkusen and PSV played out a 1-1 draw.
Karabakh triumphed 2-0 over Copenhagen in the Champions League. The victory moves the Azerbaijani team into the top 8, with an away match against Athletic Bilbao coming next. Our Katie Wilson witnessed the fans' celebrations after the match.
Well, they've only gone and done it! Just secured a 2-0 victory in the Champions League against Copenhagen, and this lot couldn't be happier. This marks only the second time that an Azerbaijani team has won in the Champions League, and it's all down to the Frenchman Abdellah Zabir, who scored in the 28th minute. Don't get me wrong, Copenhagen were pushing hard in the second half, but it wasn't enough, with the Ghanaian Emmanuel Adai securing that victory for Karabakh in the 83rd minute with a second goal. Now this leaves Karabakh in the top 8 of the Champions League table. If this carries on, Karabakh will see themselves automatically in the next round, but of course there is a long way to go. Next up, they are away to Athletic Bilbao.
That's the news update from us in Baku this morning. Stay tuned to A News for more.